Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to pop open the hood of the English language and take a really good look at the engine. And hey, don't worry, there are absolutely no grammar police here today. We're just going to be breaking down the dense, complex mechanics of English into a super clear, highly organized grammar toolkit. Because honestly, whether you're a writer, a professional, or just somebody who's fascinated by how we communicate, mastering these basic tools fundamentally changes how you build your ideas. So, let's just dive right in and ask the fundamental question that sits at the very core of all our writing and speaking. Before we can actually use a tool, we kind of need to know what it is, right? We hear the phrase parts of speech thrown around all the time, but what does it actually mean in a practical sense? Well, the Oxford Advanced Learner's Dictionary perfectly hits the nail on head here. It simply refers to the grammatical categories that we sort words into. Basically, you can think of them as word classes. It's a sorting mechanism. Every single word you use belongs to one of these specific classes, all based on the actual job it performs in a sentence. To get us there, here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the foundation, move on to naming tools, dive into action and modification, check out describing tools, look at connecting tools, and finally, we'll wrap up by exploring the evolving language. All right, kicking things off with section 1, the naming tools, which include nouns and pronouns. You literally can't talk about the world if you can't name what's in it, right? Nouns identify people, animals, places, or things, and they actually come in a few distinct flavors depending on their specific job. You've got proper nouns for specific names, abstract nouns for big concepts like bravery, and collective nouns for groups. But it's those last two, countable and uncountable nouns, where things get highly practical for your grammar toolkit. This is fascinating because the countability of a noun directly dictates the other words you're allowed to use around it. According to Cambridge Grammar, if a noun is countable, like cars or apples, you've got to use words like fewer and many. But if it's an uncountable mass noun, like information or water, the rule shifts entirely. You have to use less and much. Honestly, just understanding this one simple distinction instantly clears up one of the most common grammar mistakes people make every single day. Now, constantly repeating the exact same nouns over and over gets a little exhausting. That is where pronouns come in. They act as these incredibly versatile substitutes. Their specific job descriptions actually change based on their position in a sentence. You've got subject pronouns doing the action, object pronouns receiving it, reflexive pronouns bouncing that action back, and possessive pronouns showing ownership. They are, for sure, the ultimate grammatical shortcuts. But the crucial takeaway here is that pronouns adapt to our human needs. Oxford's Practical English Usage notes this really fascinating evolution, the widely accepted use of the singular they. When an unknown person is referenced or a gender just isn't specified, English speakers naturally default to they or their, as in somebody left their umbrella. It's efficient, it's natural, and it proves that these tools actually bend to human logic. Okay, moving on to section 2, action and modification tools, which cover verbs and adverbs. Nouns are pretty static until we give them something to do. Enter verbs. They are literally the engines of our sentences, driving the action or establishing a state of being. And they come in tons of forms. We have regular verbs that play nice and follow strict spelling rules, and regular ones that totally don't. We've got transitive verbs that demand an object to even make sense, and auxiliary or helping verbs that set the tense. We even have modal verbs like can, might, or should that don't actually show action, but rather express possibility or obligation. So once you have your engine running, you're probably going to want to tune it. That's where adverbs come in, the ultimate modifiers. They work in 3 distinct steps. First, they modify verbs, telling us how or when an action happened, like running quickly. Second, they modify adjectives to show intensity, like being very tall. And third, they can even modify other adverbs to specify the degree, like running incredibly quickly. It's like a layering effect. Next up, section 3, the describing tools, featuring adjectives and determiners. So we've covered how to modify actions, but we still need to describe our static nouns. And we actually have 2 very different tools for the job. Cambridge Grammar explicitly highlights this difference, and it's a distinction that trips up a ton of even advanced learners. While adjectives paint a vivid picture of the noun by describing its qualities, think of a tall tree or a blue car, determiners act more like pointing fingers. They don't describe what the noun looks like, they specify exactly which noun we mean or who owns it. Those trees, my tree. And determiners actually cover a few different subcategories. They range from our basic articles like a and the, which clarify if we're talking about a general thing or a specific thing, all the way to demonstratives like this and that, which literally point to things in physical space. They also include quantifiers. Words like some, all, or any do the vital work of telling us how much of a mass noun we're dealing with before we even start describing it with an adjective. All right, section 4, the connecting tools, which are prepositions and conjunctions. Up to this point, we've got a lot of isolated pieces. To build a complex, sophisticated sentence, we need grammatical glue to hold it all together. Conjunctions seamlessly connect words, phrases, or entire clauses, and picking the right one fundamentally determines the logical relationship of your ideas. A coordinating conjunction like and or but joins 2 equal ideas, but a subordinating conjunction like because or although totally changes the power dynamic, making one idea dependent on the other. Then you have correlative conjunctions that act as tag teams, working in pairs like either and or to frame choices. Prepositions, on the other hand, are highly specific connectors. They act in logical steps to anchor a noun relative to something else. First, they establish physical space. The book is on the table. Second, they establish time. We meet after lunch. And third, they show direction. We are walking towards the door. Seriously, without prepositions, our nouns would just be floating around in an empty void. Finally, we arrive at Section 5, the evolving language, or rules in motion. Now, it's super tempting to think of everything we've just covered as this rigid, unchangeable mathematics, but English isn't just a static box of tools. It's a living, breathing system. As Professor Bass Arts points out over at the Oxford Learners Dictionary's blog, even deeply structural parts of speech can just fade from popularity. He notes that the use of modal verbs like shall and must has significantly declined over time. What felt totally natural and required to a speaker 50 years ago can sound incredibly formal or stiff to us today. Practical English usage outlines exactly how these fascinating shifts happen. Basically, languages simplify themselves based on communicative need. Sometimes underground slang forms become completely respectable standard English. Distinctions that no longer serve a clear purpose, they just fade away. And quite often, what starts out as a widespread grammatical mistake gradually becomes the accepted rule. It really proves that standard English eventually bends to how people actually speak, rather than the other way around. So I want to leave you with this thought to wrap up our explainer. If the definitions of correct are always in motion, driven by the millions of people using these tools every single day, as you use your own grammar toolkit today, consider how you might literally be shaping the language of the future. What is our grammar going to look like tomorrow? Thank you so much for exploring the mechanics of English with me. Catch you next time.